share in either wisdom, story, or logic, and it's clearly amazing to hear all the differing missing links discovered by people unique to their own journeys, and in how they have come to discover them. Together, we can help to build a bigger picture for a better future, for a brighter tomorrow. Let's stand united. Let's remove the veils and let's create a new world together. Are you that missing link? Join Jesse Hale on the Missing Link Talk Show as he helps to unveil the mystery through the unique wisdom and story of others.
Welcome everybody here back to the Missing Link. Today we're excited to talk with someone who was part of an adventure tour with Montauk survivors. He's been the executive producer of the Full Disclosure Now, and he's just here to share his story. Welcome to the Missing Link Live, the Solar Bee, Brian Sang. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm great, Jesse. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here for my very first time with you and your audience. And I'm ready to talk about the Full Disclosure movement, my conference series, and my origin story. I understand is of interest. So, and I love questions from the audience.
Awesome. So why don't you start off with telling us about yourself and your journey, a little bit about your background, your education, what part of the world you grew up in, what part of the world you're in now, if you like disclosing that information,
Sure.
What got you knowing about the Montauk stuff, anything about disclosure, anything about, aliens, anything that you wanted to tell us, about your journey, your story to share with our audience here today, especially if they may be hearing you here for the first time.
Sure. So I'm hailing from northern Nevada right now. I'm originally an East Coast boy from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York areas. And really, my family came over in the wake of World War II. My father's side, grandpa, was with the Chiang Kai-shek faction, the capitalists that basically took the treasury of China and left to Taiwan and then declared the island of Formosa or Taiwan was the real China. And I guess he may have apparently had OSS connection somehow because he was with, the Chiang Kai-shek retinue and he spoke some English. And that helped get him from Taiwan as a relatively wealthy business owner to New York City and bring the family over. And he had some restaurants and laundromats over there. My mother's side, in the wake of World War II, my grandfather on that side, he had been a cook for the U.S. military who were coming through China during World War II. We had the Japanese fascists and all that. And before China went totally red, right? And then the whole Cold War with the Soviet Union as well. But grandpa, because he had that U.S. veteran status, because he was a cook for the U.S. military while they were there, that helped get him to Hong Kong. And then that helped get him and his wife over to New York City with my mother was young then. But my grandfather on my mom's side, he died soon after. So my mom grew up poor in New York City's Chinatown. But she ended up working at one of the restaurants that my grandfather ended up having in New York City. And when she was a waitress there, and my father, Jack Sang, who will figure prominently in this, he was a delivery driver there. And so they met and, got married and had myself and my two other idiot brothers, and we're working class Chinese American family. And my dad put himself through electrical engineering school. And it was a TV, refrigerator, radio repair guy, and started a company called Sang Labs out of our basement, which transformed computers on the IBM PC side during the 80s and 90s. He revolutionized overclocking in computer graphics processor cards with the Sang Labs ET4000 and then later the ET6000. He took computer memory that ran half as fast but cost half as much and made it run as fast as the better RAM, like the SRAM versus SDRAM, that cost twice as much but ran twice as fast. And so he helped kind of make it much more affordable for good graphics on the IBM PC side. He did really well at that, and that, you know, we were kind of like a rags to riches American immigrant family, which, you know, you don't see that a lot. Not back then and anymore. It's almost like I feel like forget about it. And that allowed me to go to Occidental, or first Lawrenceville boarding school, this snobby, preppy, elite boarding school that's got way too many resources compared to how many kids go there. And, you know, I don't have a chip on my shoulder, but, you know, it was a good experience. Don't get me wrong. And it was co-ed, you know, by the time I got there. I wouldn't have gone otherwise, but, you know, I was kind of out of my element around these like super elite kids coming from around the world to go to high school. And, you know, we only lived about 40 minutes away from the Lawrenceville school because we were in Pennsylvania. It was just across the Delaware and New Jersey. And from there, I got to go to Australia for a 6-week tour. And while I was there, all these kids were talking about Beverly Hills 90210. And when I got to Los Angeles, to Occidental College to get my biochem degree, they'd had the Rodney King riots. So, you know, you can imagine the kind of discordance there of like people have this fantasy of like it's all wealthy people, Beverly Hills 90210, and you get there, it's Rodney King riots. People are like getting shot and lynched in the streets. Occidental College, funny enough, turned out to be the school where they filmed Beverly Hills 90210, the college years. And hold on a second. So
just to let you know, we do have some background noise that is coming in, so I'm not sure.
Like the heater I have to keep my feet warm. Is that better? Yeah, the background noise. Okay, we got it. Thank you. And so with California University was the name of my fictional college where they were filming Beverly Hills 90210. Right. So you end up at the college campus and you see Jenny Garth and Shannon Doherty and all the cast of Beverly Hills 90210. Now they're going to college, and it happens to be the college that I'm at in real life. And they're like 40-year-old actors, you know, smoking their cigarettes. And then they go on camera and they're supposed to be playing 19 and 20-year-olds, you know. And so just seeing all this and the fakeness. And in LA, Los Angeles, there's a lot of, you know, the Hollywood curse. There's a lot of darkness and black magic there. And right, you're like, yeah, oh yeah. And so, you know, when I was there, I wasn't as hip to the occult and magic and, you know, the multi-dimensionality of our reality that I am now, you know, being a self-appointed volunteer advocate organizer to advance the full disclosure movement so we can achieve our collective Star Trek future. You know, back then I was just trying to figure it out and get a clue. And, you know, I'm just seeing people selling their lives to get on the screen, and the vast majority of people not making it, and miserable, and the stress and the traffic and the pollution. And it really did a lot to dispel all that. I mean, I knew better than the Australian kids that Los Angeles wasn't going to be like so magical as you saw on TV, but I just had no idea how, you know, there's like, that's like the amazing side of it, but then how really low the reality is with the exploitation, the satanic ritual abuse and all that. And, you know, and I've met people since then who have been exposed to that in the film industry. And so I know, you know, from, you know, firsthand people I trust that that's real. And then of course there's plenty of testimony online, and it's obvious for everyone, you know, with the Illuminati one eye sign and the outright satanic music videos, it's kind of hard to escape. You know, like that's pretty obvious. Cardi B or Little Nas is twerking on the devil while like throwing up the 666. You know, I don't think they're hiding it anymore, guys and gals. So for getting my biochem degree at Occidental College, along with a minor in economics with an environmental emphasis, I tried going into what do you call it? Biotech and biochemistry in the pharmaceutical type field. I thought I was going to learn how to genetically modify bacteria to like clean up oil spills. That's what I really wanted to do. And when I got into it and saw it, what they were hiring for, they don't hire for any of that. What they're hiring for is, people who want to work on the next drug they can market for shaky leg syndrome. Okay. And so, I didn't like that. I went up to the San Francisco Bay Area after being done with Los Angeles. And, I saw the dot-com boom go super high and then crash. And I got to start going to the Burning Man event back then when it was still cool. And I, had a lot of amazing times out there on the playa with like visionary artists and inventors and writers and musicians and chefs and just really colorful and talented people. And I got to see the dot-com boom, 2001, and the bust. And so, it's really sobering when you see people who thought, oh, they were out of college and now they're working for Google or Facebook or whatever, or Petco.com, and they've got their 501c or their stock options rather. They're waiting to get vested and they're in a $2,000 a month loft and they've got their Porsche Boxster, that they bought. And then now that's all gone and they get to go back home to Iowa to mommy and daddy. And so, that kind of was interesting. And then, of course, 2001, I was supposed to be flying back from San Francisco to Philadelphia on the day of 9/11. And that's the day that that the flight from Philadelphia to San Francisco flying the opposite way crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, flight 93. Okay. And, I had a friend who worked in that building and he showed up late that day, just as it was like the first planes that hit and they're telling people not to go in. I had another buddy where he and his father used to work for Solomon Smith Barney in one of the Trade Center towers. And, he got there late. So he never went in. His father was in the building way up high on one of the higher floors. And when the first alarm buzzer went and people started going down and then they said, oh, it's okay. You can go back to your offices now. Okay. George's dad said, screw that, just kept going. And otherwise he wouldn't be here today. Okay. Around then is when in Atlantic City on the East Coast, while visiting back home, I went with my parents to see David Copperfield perform in a casino at Atlantic City. And they said, hey, folks, everyone stay at the end and shake David's hand if you want. Meet at stage front center. I was like, yeah, my parents like, sure, Brian, that's cool. That's a great opportunity. We came here to pay to see the guy. Let's shake his hand. And so, I waited at the end and you got David Copperfield and this really kind of, from afar, she looks great, but up close, you can tell it's like really tired, cranky showgirl with like her, makeup all painted on. Like, come on, kid, let's get out of here, And I'm like, so it's like, hey, David, I'm a great admirer. I mean, Mr. Copperfield, great show, wonderful work. That's all I wanted to say. But the reason why I really stuttered at the beginning there is as we made contact, our hands, his eyes turned jet black on me. Like in a movie, like they're like it's a demon, like that's not a human. And from what I've studied about like magic and the occult and black magic, especially in his case, and spoken with people, like they can see auras and energy, people in our movement now, our community types. When you shake hands, a lot of energy is easily exchanged, given through the right hand and taken with the left. Okay. And so they're the left hand path. And if you shake the hand of a black magician, theoretically, they could take energy or a blessing from you, put a curse on you. And I believe that something like that took place. He probably was doing magic and I wasn't thinking or conscious or looking. And so just going with the flow as he was taking from me, I saw his eyes turn black. And so whatever he took from me, I don't know what it is. I renounce it, pray, and it's back to me in the name of Christ and God's source. But at the same time, he gave me a knowledge that's undeniable. Because I like to joke, Jesse, that I'm surrounded by my housemates. They can see auras. Jaden Mills, my one business partner as well, he can telepathically speak with their dogs and cats and to the birds to some extent, but he says they're really annoying, the ravens and crows out here. And because he's an animal communicator, and more people are having their telepathic abilities coming online. I
I'm like
think,
that with the animals too. I talk to the birds all the time. They're laughing and I sing back to them and they start laughing at me, and it's really fascinating to be able to communicate with beings that don't speak words.
well, and that's you and I verbally, calling, and they call back. We call 3 times, they call back 3 times, and we'll do a trill, and they'll do the trill, and that's fun. With Jaden, no, he's literally telepathically having full-on conversations with the dogs to figure out who's had a past life as a human and who hasn't, and the ones who have, what they did to end up as dogs and how they're ashamed of it, and what the one dog of ours, she Saki Socks, she was a witch in many previous lives, and she's cursed, and she's kind of, because she's sacrificed people and she's done bad magic and hurt people, and caused probably lovers to commit suicide or sacrifice to them, right? She's now being put in a punishment reincarnation cycle. And I know there are a lot of love and light people. Oh, that doesn't happen. You only go forward. If you're a human, you just, for love and light. That's not true. If you screw up in this life, what I've been told by some of the people in our community who have Galactic Federation contacts, they're telepaths, channelers, remote viewers. They themselves are in the programs. There are prison planets like what's depicted in the movie Pitch Black with Vin Diesel. Okay, where it's like a desert planet. It's really harsh and nasty, and even the best of times, like just trying to survive and eke out an existence is like, oh my gosh, and so you got to learn how to cooperate, maybe. But then at the point where there's like every couple years or 10 or however many years, there's a conjunction of the planets and the moons, and it's literally all the sun is blotted out, or the 2 suns are blotted out, and it's pitch dark for like a week or however long. And all these monsters come up that were living underneath the surface. And at that point, if you are not learning cooperation and how not to like throw the next dude under the bus because you wanted their, tiny rations or their boots or whatever, you're all going to die. And then you're going to get to relive that over and over and over. And that doesn't sound fun to me. Now, those of us, I believe, that are ascending and doing the work and, and helping disclosure, whether or not I get rewarded or whatever in an afterlife, that's not the point. But I do believe that we will be rewarded. I believe that many of us will get to go on vacation lives or get to go back to our starseed families and be celebrated and have a wonderful time. Where if heaven's your thing, you'll get to eat the feast of the supper of the Lamb with Christ and the wedding, and the new earth. But a lot of this is kind of like my thinking and what drives me forward, because going back to 9/11, not only did I almost lose personal friends there, and was I on like that crossway flight, got to see the Patriot Act and all the crackdowns. Hey, Christy Campbell is a Montauk survivor, and she'll also be at the 2025 Full Disclosure Now conference this July in Florida. And I'll get to Myra's question about what makes me succeed despite the obstacles, and thank you for the blessings. Christy has recall of being at Montauk Camp Hero underground in that base there, being MK Ultra'd and abused, along with Rocco Fowler, Joseph Powell, Arkeem Ra, James Rink, and others, Susan Long, I believe, as well. And they remember her, many of them, and vice versa. Chastity Campbell, not a relation to Christy. Chastity Campbell as well. We can get into the Montauk project as well later on. In this,
sure. Sounds like she'd be a great interview if you wanted to link that up.
Christy, you hear that? Jesse Howell's a friend of mine on Facebook, so please send him a friend request and message him. Yep. She's amazing. She also has recall of another clone altar, or an altar put into a different clone body of a little girl that had to serve a stint or be utilized at the Mothers of Darkness Castle, Le Chateau Amara, or Chateau Lamoureux in Belgium, which is known for human hunting parties of the elite globalists, the Khazarian mafia, basically. And Angie Dollar Healer Maxwell also has recall of that, and of Christie being there, and vice versa. And so this is a level of the whistleblowers and survivors and people who have testimonies to share that I'm organizing together with, because even though I don't have any recall of any of this stuff myself, I'm told that I've been in many programs and projects, and I'm in people's files, and I'm pop up in the remote viewing and the recalls, and the ACIO files. So at a certain point, I'm not fighting it, and it doesn't matter whether or not any of us have been put through what our good friends like Christy Campbell here have been put through. Doesn't matter. The fact that any of this is happening to anybody on this planet, much less especially children, is the ultimate drive. So Myra's asking what makes me succeed despite all obstacles, is I realize that it's not just about me and whether or not, if I fail. It's more like the obstacles are there stopping us from saving the children, transforming our society, having our Star Trek future with med beds, clean energy, anti-gravity, portal technology. That's what motivates me each and every day. And in the wake of 9/11, when the video came out of World Trade Center 7, the third building, Solomon Smith Barney building, collapsing at free fall, that's when I knew, and so many of us did. And so that was like, that's my 3D awakening. And then when the scamdemic hit, later on, many years later, right, 2020, by then, up in San Francisco Bay Area, I'd become a volunteer organizer of physicians. We were part of a membership organizing drive called Physicians Organizing Committee. They're still around. I parted ways with them because they embraced or didn't fight against the vaccines, and I wanted to. Sorry if I shouldn't say that word, but
okay.
yeah. But I got 8 years in of organizing physicians and nurses to reverse medical denials of heart surgeries and cancer treatment by saying, hey, let's say an insurance company told a heart surgeon, we're not going to cover that $80,000 heart surgery because they didn't want to. It's $80,000, and they make a BS excuse by some rubber stamp physician. We would get 5 other physicians who joined the voluntary association to review the patient records and say, no, why this is medically necessary. And we get back to the insurance company. A lot of times that would work. Thank you, Myra. We'd get the denial reversed. Sometimes we'd have to step it up. We'd have to be like, well, the insurance company denying this patient's heart surgery is Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they're contracted because this person is an employee of some big, huge company. Well, we can just get the human personnel people who manage that contract to call Blue Cross Blue Shield and say, you know what, we're going to dump you and go with another insurance company to cover our employees because you can't be bothered to save our one employee who needs a heart surgery. And all of a sudden, what do you know? The insurance companies are approving the surgery. Okay, it's amazing how that works. Later on, I got to learn how to fight much bigger fights, like against Sutter Health Corporation and Kaiser and Prime Health, so-called nonprofit hospital corporations that don't have to pay any taxes. They're raking in billions of dollars while they jack up the cost of care in all these hospitals that they take over for pennies on the dollar. And then what they do is they'll move into a region like San Francisco Bay Area, take over 5 hospitals, decide which 3 are the most lucrative, take the poorest 2, pull out all the best equipment, all the best patients, all the best doctors and nurses, then dump all the rest and dump all the poor people that those 2 poorer neighborhood hospitals that had been taken care of onto the county system. And then you watch San Francisco General Hospital just, it's crumbling under the weight of like like mentally ill patients. I mean, anyone who goes to San Francisco, oh my gosh, like 20 years ago it was bad, but nowadays, holy cow. And we said, we're not going to let Sutter Health take over St. Luke's Hospital, promise to keep it open for 10 years, raid it and loot it, drive down the finances of the hospital, and then say 4 years later or 3 years later announce, oops, we have to close down the hospital because it's not making it. What do you know? It's not surviving. It's not making us enough money. We don't have enough, which is BS. I mean, like they've got a lot of money. They're really owned by like a Mormon real estate outfit out of Utah, and then other deeper, probably deep state connections, I'm told, and to Toronto Dominion Bank, which also has been exposed for international banking, corruption, finance, shenanigans. And so, and I didn't know a lot of this when I was fighting these fights. Okay. But all these fights and lessons that are more, I know 3D, and I don't want to bore your audience, but I'm taking all of that and the resources left to me from my dad to apply to the movement. And if I hadn't gone through like the more 3D mundane stuff to learn how to do speaking engagements and organize volunteers and get doctors to join your cause, and who think they know better, and fight to save the hospital. The way we did it wasn't by getting a lot of people just to do a protest and get signs and say, what do we want? Healthcare. When do we want it? Now. Don't shut down St. Luke's, save St. Luke's. I mean, you do that a little bit, but it's kind of like if you do that and that's all you do, what happens is you're in front of their corporate building. You got your gaggle of volunteers with your signs and bullhorns. We see this today right now. Okay. But the causes generally aren't as noble. It's more like, let's key the Teslas and firebomb the dealership. Like that's not what I was involved in, and I think people can tell that, saving a hospital is different. You'd have the execs.
Just before you go on, this is not boring and mundane. This is great. This is great to know your story, and this is like, it's fascinating for me, so I imagine for others as well.
Oh, good. Thank you, Jesse. And so you'd have the executives looking down from the 20th floor of their corporate building with their sushi catered buffet luncheon, sipping their, Starbucks or their gin and tonics, saying, I hope the protester with a red jacket on doesn't scratch my Maserati. It accomplishes nothing. What we did as an organized effort, making an analysis with a true membership of active participants and volunteers, all backed by the community with zero government money or funding or corporate money with strings attached, all driven by the organizers and the membership doctors, was we said, well, what does Sutter care about? Their nonprofit status. Because if we can revoke their nonprofit status, that could jeopardize their entire empire, billions of dollars. And what we're going to do is we're going to go lean on all the supervisors and government officials at the state and ultimately the federal level to say, why are you granting this nonprofit status to a hospital corporation that's driving up care and shutting down hospitals in poor areas and driving people out into San Francisco General, and then the same county that's crying about not having enough money to treat people and keep the psych wards fully staffed with doctors and nurses. Okay. How come that same county, SF County, City and County of San Francisco, is granting local tax breaks to Sutter Health while they're not meeting and actually flaunting and doing everything against their tax obligations? Okay. Because that's the theory, is the reason why you're a tax-free organization is that theoretically you're doing work in the community that if I'm doing work feeding poor people, then the government says, hey, Brian, you're doing work to feed poor people that we otherwise would have to be spending resources towards. So you're doing such a great job. You don't have to pay us taxes. That's the theory behind tax, free tax benefit, 501c3, nonprofit organizations. So we put pressure. We made these supervisors look really bad. hey, you're crying about how we need more money for healthcare, but you're taking all this campaign money from Sutter. How's that work? And all of a sudden, the moment we started threatening them and their careers of these politicians, okay, now Sutter, they threw a press conference on the steps of St. Luke's Hospital. I think it was Dr. Warren Browner at the time, in his white lab coat with his Save St. Luke's pin on his chest, saying, we're not going to shut down St. Luke's. We're going to figure out how to save it. We're going to put together a blue ribbon panel. And then that was a whole nother 3-year saga. Not only did we fight and stop them from shutting down St. Luke's, we forced them to rebuild us a new one. And instead of them giving us like the 6 floors, the dinky version that they wanted to give us, we forced them to give us 8. Okay. And I was really proud of that for a couple of years. And then when the scamdemic hit, those same hospitals around the Bay Area and up in Northern California, like at the top towards Oregon, they became concentration camps, killing people on ventilators with remdesivir and midazolam to shut down their kidneys and their liver and cause fluid buildup in the lungs, where then you put them on a respirator and sedated, where even in the best circumstances, apparently you only have an 80% chance. You have an 80% chance of dying. You have less than a 20% chance of getting out of there alive. Okay, and and I'm not a doctor. I only play one on YouTube, but I do have a biochem degree and 8 years of medical advocacy organizing experience, working with some top doctors in life and death experiences for many a time. And I brought that with me to the disclosure movement, because especially early on, this community has got a lot of pain and trauma from having MK Ultra mind control and their targeted individuals, military abductees, getting hit with directed energy weapons and having our finances screwed with, or being shadow banned and censored, and having child protection services called on us, or being swatted, or I'm just naming some of the many, many ways. I know Nikki here is familiar. She says she has a family member who goes out with a group to feed the homeless, and they get all kinds of BS from the local PD and government. Feeding the homeless is not allowed. What BS is that? Yes. And the reason why is because as we go, they're trying to systematize everything and block down our freedoms and make it all about permits and licensing, so that they're trying to crush the life out of us. And then there are those who would say, no, screw that. We're going to go feed people anyway. While the 8 years of organizing the physicians, I got to visit, related organizing drives to learn their methodology, groups like farm worker organizing drives and service worker groups, where they needed help to organize doctors to donate medical care, right? And then I, as an organizer, got to learn, what's it like organizing migrant farm workers and service workers and, printers and lawyers and all different sectors of society. And all of that's become very handy, because when the scamdemic hit, this is what really motivated me to jump both feet into the full disclosure movement, is when I saw all of my friends and family, not my online people, like most of us knew better, the starseeds and light workers and all that, people like Derek here. Remdesivir killed his wife's father. Yeah, it's also used as an execution medicine too. Run, death is near. Yep. And
I was just about to say that.
Yep. And yeah, they said ivermectin is a horse dewormer. Well, yeah, it is a horse dewormer. It's also a dog dewormer and a people dewormer and any mammal dewormer. So yeah, you might as well have made fun of it as a people dewormer too, and also a parasite killer and cleanser and cancer killer. But and I know there are people out there talking about there's a lot of unsafe formulations of ivermectin being possibly put out there, where they may be adding nanographene oxide to it. So be careful. I look it up, but I believe the natural form of ivermectin comes from something known as artemisinin. And so there are like natural ways to make ivermectin.
It's Pau de Arco, black walnut, and I forget what in my head. I don't have it in my head, but there's 3 of the natural substances that they use to make the ivermectin. Ivermectin is still a pharmaceutical, so you want to stay away from pharmaceuticals because they're adding whatever. And some people have even talked about people being maybe even sterilized by the ivermectin that they're getting from some of these places or whatever, right? But there are
Yeah.
the natural substances that they use to make that are natural that you can use to detox. There's obviously black seed oil, black walnut, pau de arco. So there's the natural substances. Those things you can just source yourself, and then you just get yourself your own parasite cleanse or your own dewormers, but without having to, again, back to pharmakia, the black magic sorcery. It doesn't matter if it's ivermectin or vitamin C. If it comes from pharmakia, they may come attached with a spell on it.
Yeah, and they're using dubious sources to produce it and all that, exactly. And so I realized that the need for medical beds when everyone started rolling up their sleeves. And I cried and jumped up and down and swore at people, don't do it. Tried to go into the science of like why having synthetic mRNA injected into you to the tune of billions of copies to go in a nanolipid particles to cross the blood-brain barrier and all throughout your body, why that's a bad thing, and why you don't want to replicate spike protein everywhere, because then as it gets in your vascular system and goes to all the cells of your body, now the spike protein can trigger autoimmune disease. And then that's where you see a lot of people. It's the spike proteins are probably going into their facial muscles, causing autoimmune damage when the system tries to remove the spike proteins and damages the nerves. And now people have got paralyzed faces and they got like Guillain-Barré syndrome, and they're wondering why. That's why, guys. Or one reason why. There are probably maybe others too. The graphene hydroxide that gets metabolized apparently into graphene hydroxide and makes you super magnetic. Or the people who are shining a black light on their where they got injected, and they're finding it's lighting up like with luciferase, a trail with like a perfect rectangle chip that's probably self-assembled that goes all the way down to their hand, where there's another array will appear. And there are videos on this that have been mostly banned and censored off of YouTube, but they are definitely out there on BitChute and probably some on Rumble and
And
Odyssey.
that luciferase apparently was made in Jared Kushner's building, 666 Fifth Ave, downtown New York is where they actually made the luciferase. He's now sold that building to Brookfield, which is, Mark Carney of Canada. That's his company that bailed out Jared Kushner because he had, I don't know, 28 million or whatever. So they bought that or leased it for 100 years, that building. And so there's ties with Mark Carney, Qatar, Brookfield, and Jared Kushner that we've been uncovering as well.
Yep. Yeah, the web is deep. The other side, Dr. Rima Leibal spilled the beans on with Jesse Ventura 21 year or like around 2003 maybe it was, to speak about how this was going to happen. Rudolf Steiner, he foresaw this like 100 years ago. So for those of us who have eyes to see and ears to hear and who pay attention, none of this is a surprise. As terrible as it is to see it play out in a real life. Wow, we kind of are seeing the end times. Of course, into the new times, so it's not all doom and gloom, okay? Not the higher timeline. The lower timeline, which I don't want to be on, probably, but we're in the higher timeline. Yeah, so I saw the need for medical beds. I started telling everyone, don't do it, don't take the jabs. And Facebook canceled me. So I lost my account that I had 5,000 contacts on or whoever almost. And, my whole life, first girlfriends, blah, 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 high school buddies and all that, family. And when that got shut down, there's like a year, I was like, F Facebook, this sucks. And then I was like, no, I need to be back on. And when I came back on, I friended people in the sword collector community and the sword makers. because I like to collect swords, both Eastern and Western European. And let's see. The other side was I friended Sean Bond of the psionicleague.com, who he himself is an experiencer, psychic, secret space program, veteran who, experiencer. And when he accepted my friend request, it's like that opened the door to me, like friending everybody in our community, who many of whom I've since met and have gotten to work with. And it put me in touch with James Rink of supersoldiertalk.com, who a mutual friend or someone I later met on the Montauk Adventure Tour, Angel Song, who herself is a Montauk survivor, had said to James, "Hey, James, we should get people together, survivors together, for the 80th anniversary of the Philadelphia experiment." Okay. That's when 1943, August 12th, the USS Eldridge was off of the naval facility of Philadelphia in the water, and they activated a Tesla generator on each end, apparently, of the USS Eldridge. And they had sailors on board. And Tesla, I think, was supposed to have been part of that project, or it might have been, and like another famous scientist, like von Braun, or not von Neumann, or I forget who. And it wasn't Werner von Braun, not the Nazi. It was an American scientist. But they both said this technology is too dangerous to expose human beings to. Do not do this. And the U.S. Navy said, "Nah, we're going to go ahead and do it." By then they were finding out that Hitler had Die Glocken, Hitler's bell, and they had the Hanabu, the flying UFOs, I think. So the U.S. military, they really wanted to catch up, and they unfortunately didn't care about the health of the sailors. And so I'm sure your audience is very familiar with the famous pictures of the sailors that are like merged with the hull of the ship, and they're wearing like the white Daffy Duck kind of sailor outfits, the World War II get-ups. And I'm told that a lot of those photos out there, there's at least 3 or 4 that are very real. And then there's a whole bunch of movie recreations, and people are like, "Oh, that's fake. That was in the movie. It was in the movie about the real life project, and here are the real life pictures."
John von Neumann.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it was von Neumann. And yeah, so then U.S. Navy figured out that it works, and it's very dangerous. Many of the sailors died or went insane, and the ship phased out of time and space. Not only did it go off the radar, it literally jumped around like Norfolk, Virginia, and it might have jumped to Montauk off Oyster Point there on the east end of Long Island. And that's where we were, for the 80th anniversary. And because the tie-in between the Philadelphia experiment in 1943 and the Montauk Project is that when the military and the derp state figured out that this technology, there's something more to it, they began to move the experiments over to Brookhaven National Laboratory, which is kind of on the center of Long Island. So if you got like Manhattan, you run out from Manhattan all the way out to like all the way around Long Island. You've got the center of Long Island was where Brookhaven National Laboratory is. And, maybe while we're talking, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And basically, I want to show you the layout because it makes a lot of sense. Brookhaven National Lab. I'm going to look at the maps here, because if you're going to have like crazy experiments messing with time and space and interdimensional portals, do you want to do that right there in downtown Manhattan, where if shit goes south, it's really, really bad? Okay. No. Instead, you kind of want to be, at a really high-end, well-funded facility where you can kind of control everything and contain it. And let's say it blows up, at least it's not in downtown New York, right? And right here, you can see, this like cyclotron, particle accelerator thing going on. Okay. And it looks like here's like another one. And they later on moved the experimentation from Brookhaven. Maybe they decided they wanted even more privacy and security, all the way out here to the very east end of Long Island. We call it the tail of the fish. Okay. South Fork. And this is where you had Camp Hero Army Base, which at the time was decommissioned because, it's at the end as after World War II. But so you got these facilities here, including the infamous Sage radar tower. Okay. And this radar tower, underneath this facility, this is where they're keeping children in cages. And they were, using this radar array to like beam energy frequencies at people in the nearby sleeping fishing village and at people on base. So, people talk about, 5G and all this electronic warfare. A lot of that was pioneered at Montauk, along with a lot of the MK Ultra mind control, torture, and abuse, and nasty Luciferian rituals perpetrated by people like Preston Nichols. Okay. And, so we wanted to do the 80th anniversary. The reason why is apparently the Earth has a natural time cycle rhythm of 20-year cycles. Because it's the easiest to manipulate the Earth with time travel, at least down here on the planet, in 20-year increments. And apparently John von Neumann, and he's, I think, credited with discovering that in the Philadelphia Project movie, or Philadelphia Experiment, one of the movies. They have a character, who's basically, it's John von Neumann, Dr. Neumann, and von Neumann. And he discovered this natural Earth rhythm. And what do you know? The time travel programs, the 20 and backs, right? They're in increments of 20 years, because I've heard of 20, 40, and 60 and backs, and even 80 and backs, apparently. And then later on, I think Rebecca Rose or Penny Bradley or Laura Eisenhower, I forget who in her community, they testify that later on, as they got better at time travel, they could do it in like 10-year and 5-year increments. It's like, octaves on the node, or what nodes on the frequency, node points. Although it's still apparently really dangerous. Question: do I think we're on the Gregorian or man-made calendar? I think the Gregorian calendar is a man-made calendar, and they took out the 13th month, Ophiuchus, and so that's why instead of September, October, November, December being sept, being 7, oct, 8, Novo, I guess 9, or and even that's messed up. September, October, November, December, because you think December. So the months of the year seem to be screwed up somehow. And so absolutely, do I think it's screwed up? Do I know exactly how? Not really. But I do know that the Catholic Church, for one, had played a great role in that, and I'm not surprised. Yeah. So I co-organized this adventure tour with James Rink and about 20 other Montauk survivors and supporters.
What year?
To go. What's that? This was in 2023, because that was the 80th anniversary of the 1943 August. So it was August like 9th to 15th or 14th. We were at Montauk, staying in 2 Airbnbs. We had a group on the day of the exact, anniversary, August 12th. We had one group doing energy work, healing and clearing. And I was part of that group at Camp Hero, at this roundabout where there's a lot of barracks where, here, I'll present my screen right now again. Entire screen.
Yeah, there's a lot of different people that have different theories on how off we are in our calendar. Woo Writer DG from YouTube says some say our timeline calendar is 1,000 years off. Some people say it's 100 years off. Some people say it's 1,000 years off. It's hard to really tell because they've messed with our history so
And
much
timeline.
and
And
timeline.
timeline. Yeah,
is-
not just written history, recorded history, but they actually did time travel missions out of Montauk base, or Camp Hero Army base here. The proper code name was the military code name is Project Phoenix. And so there's a lot of disclosure in the Marvel comic books. And so it's no coincidence that they have like the Phoenix Project in the Marvel books, comic books. Susan Long in our community is apparently who Jean Grey is based off of. And Susan Long kind of she looks like the Jean Grey that they portray in the movies too, physically a bit. So I was with a group here on the base. I think we were around one of these. There's like a roundabout here doing energy work, and people who are, they have their third eyes open and active. They were seeing all sorts of golden orbs flying out of the ground and up into the sky. And apparently we were doing a lot of energy healing to kind of bring love and support to the lost souls of Montauk. Our friend Michael Quincy Roser, also known as a Dark Hour Paranormal Mike, he did a documentary that's easily found on YouTube called Lost Souls of Montauk, and it speaks about this a bit. But
Were they also cutting cords, like some attachments, like, because
exactly.
obviously some people were still, attached to that area through the trauma, through the programming, through the timeline. So was it about trying to clean it up, trying to cut some of those cords, just kind of release people and get them to go free?
Yes, because apparently a lot of the orbs flying up from the ground were the souls of people who had died and suffered because of the Montauk Project in other timelines. Because the effect of Montauk isn't just screwing up our timeline that we're in, it's effed with plenty of other timelines. And apparently Montauk, this Camp Hero Army base here, there are versions of it that exist in time bubbles where they may still be active, like right now in our linear time, but they're adjacent to us because you got these things called time bubbles. Okay, it's pretty wild. Time travel, the whole methodology of it and their time travel missions, it's wild. I've made it a point to study as much as I can by speaking to as many for real survivors of these projects as I can. And I've got a lot of information. A lot of this comes from Arkeem Ra, John Whitberg, who's written the Castle of Glass free ebook series online. He's now on volume 3, working on volume 4. And hopefully he has his PayPal up there so you can send him a donation, because that's his real life testimony of one of his alters, Kyle Delshow, and what he was subjected to and experienced at Montauk, and then as a secret space program super soldier. What do we ask? I've got a question in the audience. How did what get on here? I don't know what you mean by has.
I'm not sure if Lisa means how did this interview get on her timeline or what, but Taffy was asking her, I don't know what you mean. How did this get on here? Can you explain? So maybe how that base get there. I'm not sure, but
And then we have Nikki, or Angels Are Life, saying she keeps psychically seeing children in cages on a retired military Air Force base in old flight hangars. And those in charge are starting to move the kids around to other areas, over 1,000 kids. Yeah, the number of children who were sacrificed to this project is astounding. I've heard everywhere from tens of thousands to 300,000 plus.
wow.
And so when you factor in international kidnapping, because they weren't just taking kids from Long Island, New York, and downtown Manhattan, and Staten Island or wherever. They were bringing kids down from Canada, like Chris Letterer is one
We
of them.
interviewed him, and he talked about how his mom was giving him LSD and doing things for, this group. He would go to school, and then they would take him from that school and get him to do things at like 6, 7, 8 years old, and train and try to make them assassins. And what a crazy story that is.
Oh, I mean, he's not alone. That's exactly what Joseph Powell, James Rink, Arkim Ra, Christy Campbell, Chastity Campbell, Stephen Shearer, Susan Long, I believe, and others. I mean, that's just off the top of my head, And then what Tony Rodriguez, who wrote series Colony Cavalier, and whose testimony has been vetted by the Farsight Institute on a scientific blind remote viewing basis. His 20 and Back and Secret Space Program testimony is likewise validated. Because when it comes down to it, the military, the loser fairy and derp state, their favorite is super psychic super soldiers. Because if you have people who can open up portals and see back and forth through time, kill people with their mind, access information that otherwise no one else could get, but they can get it by going into a meditative trance. That is all incredibly valuable. And what I like to say is that these people are in our community today. Many of them have hung out their shingle saying, hey, hire me for a 2-hour, channeling session or remote viewing or psychic, viewing session. And they're literally secret space program military grade. And you can just go online and give them $150 and, have them for an hour and a half, to assist you. That's amazing. Oh yeah, they keep saying they're shipping containers. Well, absolutely. That's why they gave Hillary her Secret Service designation as evergreen.
Evergreen shipping.
Yep. Dexter alludes to it in all sorts of groups. And then there's all the screaming kids who are being recorded, inside the shipping containers, which the port workers are not allowed to open for whatever reason. Yeah. They're all sick bastards. They are loser farians. They're terrible. Absolutely terrible.
And the ports in Vancouver, that come into Canada, apparently that's where, a lot of the drugs that come into North America, come through those ports. And they're only checking 5% of the shipping containers that come through there. So the other 95%. So obviously it's controlled by the Hells Angels, the Triads. They kind of control that. They're bringing in a lot of the drugs through there. They take them out to the mountains, where they put them into processing labs. And then in those processing labs, they make them into the fentanyl and all these other things that they're making. And then they're, distributing it through Canada, through America, through all of that. And there's also been reports that, some of these groups that are profiting off of these ports and drugs and things are actually paying the politicians. So they're directly making laws. They're directly, profiting off of, these crimes and who knows what else, if children and other things. Like I even heard that there was a submarine port off of the port there in Vancouver where they take these people, they go down, they bring in a submarine, they take them out in a sub so they don't even actually see anybody that's taking the kids out of Canada or bringing them in, through the port, underneath the port.
And that's why you had Ghislaine Maxwell with her Terra Mar ocean exploration and sub license, driving her submarine around Epstein Island, and why you had Disney bringing snorkeling trips to Epstein Island. That's exactly why. And, I guess this kind of gets us to where do we go from here? Because someone was asking if there were any arrests. From what I can tell, there are arrests. For one thing, over the last several years, going back to 2016, when Trump first came in, apparently with the backing of the White Hats, You started to see mass CEO resignations. You started to see a lot of celebrities and politicians with tracking boots and anklet monitors. The royal family has been falling away since the Pope has now died. You see people like Simon Cowell and others. It seems like they've got obvious bad body doubles. Biden was obviously swapped out. You've got outlets like Real Raw News, and I don't think they get everything right, but I think they do get a lot right. I think sometimes when they report that someone was hung or executed, a firing squad or whatever, that person may have actually been. And then now we're seeing avatars, CGI avatars, body doubles, that sort of thing, and clones. So it's hard to say, but there's a lot of indicators that cleanup is happening behind the scenes. Our job, yeah.
Since you mentioned that, why do you think it's so important to keep the facade going with these body doubles, clones, actors? Because to me, it's really hard for me to, I guess, believe that any of it is for the good, because if there really was things going on and people were getting arrested and people were being taken to Gitmo and trials and things, they would want to disclose this. They would want the support of the people. They would want people to know that this stuff is happening. And so it's so hard to ingest that there's a lot of people that talk about these things, but it doesn't seem like, from my objective, that any of this could be for the good, because they've been doing is deceitful, lying, and all these
Well,
type of things. So if in
there are
order for them
reasons.
for them to continue on with the bad deceit, just makes them good deceitful people. It doesn't really make any sense, because if
No, it
they were
does.
really
It
on the,
does.
I've heard 1,000 people try to explain it, but
Well, let me
it's a,
try. Let me
yeah.
try. You got to do the math. You got 8 billion people in the world. Okay. Let's say times 0.01, okay, would get me right 1% of that. And so let's say 0.00001% of that. Okay. Or you've got like 8 million bad guys to round up. If it's like 0.0001% or something like that of 8 billion people. Let's say there's 8 million really bad people. They each have 10 henchmen. Okay, so now you're back up to 88 million people to round up. At the point where you've got to round up everybody, you don't want to do it necessarily openly in public to let everyone else know to run and scatter and get armed up and fortify and stock up their underground bunker that they're going to disappear to and in some other country to try to never be found. You have to carry out as much as you can behind the scenes, round up as many bad guys, get as much information as you can, and then stick out sock puppets to keep everyone thinking it's business as normal, as long as you really are doing the cleanup behind the scenes. And again, I am seeing indications of that, from everything from the Epstein files that have been leaked that people know about and have known about for years, to the Q drops and people like NT Lawyer, the stuff he's leaking on his like Twitter feed or whatever, to I mean, I see a lot of the Q drop stuff. It's happening, and what I believe is that the good guys, the white hats, have access to time travel technology just like the bad guys do. Where like the Simpsons, they've had access to the chronovisor, and that's why they're able to draw scenes 10 years ahead, pretty much the exact frame, right? Well, that's why, because you have time travel technology, you can see into the future, then sure, you can make cartoons about what you guys saw. And that's part of them trying to anchor in a negative future and timeline. because Matt Groening, by his own admission, is a 33rd degree Freemason. And that's why the Simpson colors are in the Khazarian Mafia, Ukrainian yellow and blue. That's why the Simpsons yellow skin tone and blue hair. That's why.
So you think that, this show, this movie, whatever you want to call it, do you think that it's going to continue on going for much longer? Or do you think that, like things are going to start to become more publicly information available to more of the masses, mainstream media? We keep on talking about how corrupt the mainstream media is and how they only push the narrative and how there's so much indoctrination, so much programming. So why isn't the mainstream media been taken over? Why isn't, good stuff coming on mainstream media? These are some of the things that, if they're continuing to say all these, narratives and spin the narratives, to protect the bad guys, then wouldn't that potentially be a target where they should be, trying to, take over so they could actually start giving people real truth?
So it has to be a stepwise process. And they've been trying to do stuff like that this whole time. And that really speaks to the power of the media, not just locally, state, national, federal, and international rather. Um, it's really difficult. What I think is happening is, first, they need to get a hold of their intelligence and security apparatus. And so it began, and it's still happening, with the white hats fighting the black hats in the military. So there's not even a unified command right now in the military, right? It's a civil war within the military chain of command between those who are supportive of the current Trump administration and the clean out, draining the swamp, and those who are hardcore Obama, Biden appointees and Bush, who don't want to go anywhere. And so it's not just red versus blue, but there's aspects of that, of course. Then after the military, this is exactly what we're seeing right now. They're cleaning out the CIA and the FBI. That's what all this. Every time they say USAID in the lamestream media, USAID is just a wing, the money funnel of the CIA. Okay, and they're cleaning that up or cutting funding, and they're doing the same thing with FEMA and with the FBI. A lot of people, they're so disappointed that the Epstein files are the same files that got leaked 10 years ago. Well, just because Kash Patel gets appointed to the director of the FBI 3 weeks ago or whatever, or a month and a half ago, that doesn't mean that corrupt FBI agents and apparatus going all the way back to the days of J. Edgar Hoover, blackmailing people and being dirty. FBI has been dirty, helping with child trafficking this whole time. So you don't just appoint a new head of the agency and all of a sudden they all turned into Fox Mulder and Scully. That's not what happens. What happens is you've got the very few Foxes and Scullys, and then you've got all these corrupt agents and brass, and then you got the very top coming down with the president and Kash Patel trying to sort out who is who. And that doesn't happen overnight. When you look at how much Trump that his administration has cleaned up in corruption and that's been done, it's not being talked about in the press. First of all, who owns the press? We talked about USAID and the CIA. Well, they oversaw Operation Mockingbird. That means every major media outlet and all their offices had CIA agents in them. So then do you think the same CIA that's been protecting the pedophile Satanists like Jimmy Savile, the royal family, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Bidens, this whole time, do you think they're going to now start all of a sudden, because Trump's president, talking about all this stuff? No, they're going to do everything to talk about anything but. I mean, they'll want to talk about tariffs every day until they can wear that out on the news cycle. So it really is a Muppets show on the surface, but I really do believe stuff is happening in the background, and it's happening in the spiritual upper realms first, okay, where they get cleaned out, and then that reverberates down here in the lower realms.
Well, I want to mention here, so this is Nude Guru's comment, which is a good friend of ours from our YouTube channel. He says white hats question mark, good guys question mark. Couldn't be that's the MK Ultra narrative itself that's going on, that part of this whole MK Ultra, is spinning these
No,
narratives, getting people to believe that this
no,
stuff, and there's so
no.
much content creators and getting people in, believing in more in hopium, that there's someone out there that's going to save them instead of, he says here, the swamp that needs to be cleaned is the mind. Wakey, wakey, distraction is heavy on this one. So, where he thinks that, you need to be able to, look after yourself. No longer, you need you know, the powers that be to rely on, right? Where you need to
So
figure it out yourself. Dark night of the soul. You need to
so
figure this.
so in so a couple of things there. Number one, I consider that to be a quote unquote black pill position. Is it's all a psyop, it's all MK Ultra. There's nothing we can do on that side, but go ahead and free your mind. And that's not my approach at all. First of all, I'm a big guy on discernment and proofs, and how do you create a working model and then model out situations and then figure out by what happens in the real world if your model works or not. And if it works and you can make accurate predictions by doing certain actions or not, then at the point where, if it was all a psyop, it was all MK Ultra, we would have gotten the blue lady. We'd have forced lockdowns, and disarmament, and
But
you
not
wouldn't see.
necessarily. But not necessarily, because they
Well,
needed
not
to,
necessarily, sure.
but wait, but like, so what I'm saying though is, like, like you said, with the CIA and all these things, they have to shake the tree to see who is corrupt and see who they can. But on the other side of the fence, they also had to shake the tree to see who is not programmed, to see who will stand up against them. So then they give you someone who they hammer in the media, like a Trump, who they, oh, look, he's one of us, to get everybody. Now they're going to see. And, is it, the Trump side, the white hats? Is it just maybe another cabal that's wanting to eliminate a different cabal? Now these technocrats are going to come in, eliminate all of these jobs, make it all on a digital, everything on artificial intelligence. Like, is it just one corrupt, cabal or group of set of people? Maybe they are getting rid of, maybe they are working together. They're just giving
No, there are
people.
factions. So there are factions. People like Leo Zagami of the P2 Freemasons and others, and the reporting of BenjaminFulford.net indicates there's definitely at least two different factions. And then when you speak with John Whitberg and Arkim Ra, they bring into the fact that not only is there the old school Illuminati, Khazarian Mafia, Vatican type faction, then yes, you do have the more Silicon Valley techie technocrat Neuralink faction. Okay. You also have the secret space program Germans and the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, the off-world groups who are really in charge. Okay, underneath the Anunnaki and the remnants of the Draco. And you have to understand that it's not about Trump. People are so focused on Trump. You have to understand it's about the white hat movement. And if it wasn't for white hats, then the military would be totally taken over, and there would be anything to stop them when they had that scamdemic from just locking us all down and militarizing everything. It's because we have the Second Amendment that we're able to stand up to this.
Also, the Canadians, though, what the Canadians did with that truckers changed everything
Of course,
worldwide.
and in Amsterdam, and in France and Germany and all over, and then all the mass gatherings of people in the Middle East. None of this is being covered by the mainstream media, like at all. And so, at the point where they're firing FBI agents and IRS agents and shutting down IRS offices and shutting down the Department of Education, which has been spewing a lot of woke bull crap for too long now, to me, those are all good things, and I'll rock with that. People say, "Oh, Brian, you're just going along with the psyop." You know what? Whether it was Harris or Trump, I'd still be organizing. I'd still be bringing out as many survivors and whistleblowers and testifiers to my conferences on my platform and on the shows, and helping to network each other and share resources and help find people places to live and have the money they need to eat, and how do they deal with the targeting and the demonic possession and get their recalls back and all of that. That's a lot of work. And I'm pretty sure it would be a lot harder under a Harris administration right now than under an administration where, a lot of people, I'll give you a perfect example of this. They're so angry when Trump announced Project Stargate with the AI and the mRNA technology. And he announced it's like $500 billion initiative. Okay. My take on that is there's no $500 billion AI mRNA tech initiative popped up overnight just because Trump got elected. Silicon Valley, the Ralph Ellisons and the DARPA type folks, the Department of Advanced, Weaponry, Research Project Agency, DARPA, they had that planned all along. They probably would have gotten more money and funding under a Harris administration. So Trump calling it out and announcing it, and trying to get on top of it, is it he's trying to bring in our transhumanism future, or is he like putting a giant spotlight laser beam on these guys over here? Okay. My understanding with Operation Warp Speed, which, there's a big part of me that I just still don't forgive him for that. What I've heard is he was told a lot of BS about how great the jabs were and to trust Fauci by people like Kushner, probably, and people he had around him. And he listened to them and he didn't know much better. And what I'm told is partly why it's called Operation Warp Speed is because if they hadn't done that, the original plan of the other side was to not trot out the jabs until about 2030. So this is in line with what's known as Agenda 21, which they had to stall and rename Agenda 2030 because they're off track, which is good news for us. And they were going to do successive lockdowns and shutdowns. And then there was going to be a point where we were so locked down that then they were going to force inject us all. And they had the FEMA camps ready. And that's where this is very well documented. All the plastic FEMA coffins that can hold like 3 dead bodies at a time, and all the guillotines that they ordered from France or wherever, or Italy. Okay. That stuff is real. Right. Well, that stuff, some of that is apparently being repurposed to hold some of these FEMA and CDC and NIH and FBI and CIA corrupt people. And Guantanamo Bay has gotten way bigger since the first Trump administration. And there's a lot of indicators that Biden stole the 2020 election, and they're now releasing the receipts on this, on what we truthers have been saying all along. And there's indications that the white hats, they ran that as a gotcha operation. And so there's video evidence of like people on Team Blue bringing in trucks to like bring in votes right after the polls had already closed. Okay. And so people, they say, well, I don't see it on the TV news. I don't see change happening. Well, you're not gonna. But if you see the way the world, according to all these data points and what's really happening, and you studied about who these people are and why they do the black eye rituals and all that crap, and how they're dying off and fading and being replaced with body doubles, you start to see, oh, maybe, yeah, there's this movie that we're being played at the drive-in theater, but I can see what's really happening behind the scenes.
And I like to, I'm one of those people that will, say the good things and also, point out the bad. I'm not here on one side or the other. I'm just here to try to be as objective as possible. I bring on people onto the show that think Trump is the savior and even Jesus Christ. And I bring others that think he's a Zionist, shill, Jesuit, puppet that is just playing the game, right? And so we just, as real, truthers, are we're just here to just figure out all through all the information what people are saying. But my favorite saying is, "You'll know them by their fruits."
Exactly.
And what they do. And right now, and I see a lot of good actions that this administration is doing, but then I also see some things that, I again makes you want to question things, right? And especially the stuff that's happening in Palestine and the support for that and wanting to clean those people out and bringing in people to the White House or whatever that are all about decimating that place. And so it's hard when you see some good things and you see like stuff with the schools and the indoctrination, the programming, all kinds of good things happening, but then you also see some stuff that is very sus. And
Absolutely.
and we have to keep up our kind
Yeah,
of our conspiracy or
and that's our
truth or
job.
radar,
Well, well,
and not
our job.
and not just believe just because some cool content
No, of
creators say, "Look, this is what has
course.
happening." But we have to be very weary or be
Be
very on
critical.
guard.
We
Yeah,
we have
critical of.
we have to remain critical. So it's called critical, a position of critical support, and that is a mature, nuanced, pragmatic way of doing it. Where you see them doing the right things, you cheer them on. Where you see them doing the wrong things, raise hell. Okay, but the idea of, oh, he's the antichrist, just complain and cry on the sidelines and key Teslas for the next 4 years, that's not going to do it. That's not an ascended way. you
No.
know um, I'll give you an example. Elon Musk, Arkim Ra has recall of being at a mind controlled slave, forced to be at the Mothers of Darkness castle at one of these human hunting parties. And he has recall of Elon Musk and his mother, May, casually standing side by side, chatting with each other while eating human hors d'oeuvres. They had like the roasted human, like you could slice into them and like have some of like the buck roast or whatever, the rump roast. Okay. And what I'm told is that Elon's bloodline, his mother certainly, yeah, he's bloodline, Illuminati, and he has probably his altars. He has at least one altar that knows that we are already on Mars and out in space. And apparently he used his funds to buy some space villa somewhere off planet. Okay, so he's fully aware, at least at one altar. Um, and of the bloodliners, he does want reform. He doesn't want the old way. And so, while yes, is he in the family? Is he in the bloodline? Has he been forced to partake in this? Yes. Okay. So there are people out there like, well, that means that there's no going back. Screw that guy, whatever.
I'm not like that either because most people are victims, no matter
Right.
where they are. They're brought into this situation, they're brought into this world,
He was brought in.
whether you worked your way up or you were a bloodline family. You're most people are victims. They've had things happen to them which made them who they are. Can people change? Can people turn around and become better people? Of course they can. I think that that's one of this places are. And I think the people that are most deeply enrooted into the Illuminati, into these secret societies, into the Jesuits and all this can become the brightest stars if they
Yeah.
come out because they've gotten all of the inside info and they can help humanity more than most others that just talk about it and talk shit about others.
Right. And look at all the dead celebrities who've been hung from doorknobs. What I've been told since then, because I was like, why would anyone hang themselves off a doorknob at like, wrist height? Well, the code there is the Illuminati are saying to everybody in the know that you will have your airway cut off before you get to tell the secrets behind the closed door. That's what that's Illuminati code for. And so, people like Michael Hutchins of In Excess, or Chester Bennington, who looks like he was a bastard son of Podesta. Okay. Also not only that, but we have psychic contacts and people who are remote viewers, and people who are in touch with like the Galactic Federation and angels. Okay. They're all separately on their own through their own life paths and journeys and gifts are getting amazing messages that are consistent with positive, good change. And so that's why I can't rock the black pill message, because that's like, it's all a psyop, it's all doom and gloom, we're all screwed. Someday we're going to wake up and they're going to be, kicking our doors in and force injecting us with robotic dogs. Okay. I don't subscribe to that. That actually, to me, is the opposite of being ascended and empowered. I don't feel like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid anywhere, because I applaud the administration for good work. I absolutely denounce it for things like, in Palestine. I think it needs to be moving a lot better. I'm glad they didn't nuke Iran like Israel wanted them to do recently. So that's a good sign. Okay. But I'm still going to organize 7 days a week, do the conference series, put together a platform, rally everyone together, distribute resources, help people heal and get their recall back, and get everyone to much bigger venues and audiences, and to continue to call on the Trump administration to be supportive of our effort and to open up the files and to go from there.
We have Woo Rider DG from our YouTube says, Brian is probably one of the people I respect the most in the phenomenon community, not afraid to speak on the topic folks shy away from. Most are afraid of getting canceled. And, like for us, we could easily just stick to one side, stick to the Trump train, stick to the queue, and just be very, very, popular and all that kind of stuff. But that's not us. That's, we lose a lot of people because, like I said, people that are fully indoctrinated into one side or the other, they don't like you interviewing somebody that's going to bash that side, and it turns them off the show. And like, we just want to give a voice to everybody, let people share their information, whatever that information there be, ask good honest questions, and then let people decide what they want to think, whether they align with the person, whether they think the person's full of shit. We just ask people to be respectful of the people we bring on, because we're not always going to bring on someone that's your favorite or very popular. But if you're at least, when you start being disrespectful to our guests, then that's being disrespectful to me, because I'm the one who invited the person on the show. So I don't like to see that, and, I like people to have free speech, but when people are disingenuous, or when people are only here to attack the guest, then, I'll easily just, delete them. Right. So, because I don't need to see that, because it doesn't make me feel good for someone, if you don't like somebody, you want to say one thing and peace out, great. But if you the whole 2 hours and you're just hammering on somebody, well, obviously, you're not here for any good. Because when I don't like something, I just change the program, move on somewhere else. I don't spend my time hating on someone, because then that shows more about you than it does the person that you're hating on, that you're the one that needs work. Because why would you spend so much time, hating on somebody if you aren't the one that's the controlled up?
Well, I can give some real life examples. We have a good friends in our community, Drago Reed and Laura Eisenhower, right? And Drago, he was in the programs. He's also Montauk, and definitely a secret space program. I'm not sure how much Montauk recall he has, but he has a lot of Kruger super soldier memories. And he has a trauma twin, someone else, beautiful young lady who was also in the programs with him, probably at Montauk together. They were trauma bonded, and in the here and now, they were in touch, and they've had their ups and downs, and they've since gone their separate ways, right? But needless to say, earlier last year, this gal who I've gotten to speak to her about this, she says over the course of a weekend, she was getting hit with voice to skull, where the voice was telling her, Drago ruined your life. Drago's evil. Drago's bad. Drago's this. Drago's that. Get Drago. Get Drago. You need to get Drago. And so over the course of this weekend, our friend, she's like telling the voice to skull handler, basically, F you. I'm not going to do it. I like Drago. I know what this is. I'm not interested. F off. Okay. Because voice to skull technology is two-way these days. They have something known as synthetic telepathy. And so not only can they beam a voice in your head, they can pick up what you're thinking. And so 15 minutes at the end of the weekend of them trying to goad this gal into going after Drago, and her saying no, 15 minutes after that voice to skull stopped, she goes online and there's this giant post going by this lady named Ash Bray going after Drago and Laura Eisenhower. And what I can tell is this Ash Bray person, she and people like her, Jesse Balk was just arrested in his township for threatening the police with weapons. People like Eugene Sonny Irvin in Texas, who's threatened to come out and hunt people down and kill them. The people like Joshua Bortnick, these are real life people who have been in the programs, MK Ultra mind controlled. They've been tortured and fried out so badly that they're scrambled in the here and now. And they think that we in the disclosure movement are their enemies, and they need to call us and threaten with slitting our throats. That's what Jesse Balk threatened to do to Penny Bradley. Okay. All sorts of nastiness. And what it is they're being used as useful idiot Manchurian candidates to terrorize people in our movement. And I did a session with Olivia James, also known as Gray Mouse. Have you ever heard of her, Jesse?
No, I don't think so. But we've had Laura on the show quite a few times.
Okay. Well, Olivia James, she was in the projects, and she had to go through nasty stuff, like being possessed by demons and channeling, because the elite, they exploited her for this unique ability she has to channel demonic beings without suffering negative repercussions. And we were doing a session where we were utilizing her abilities for our side. So Misha Johnston of Starseed Awakening, she runs a lot of Starseed experiencer support groups for people who've been through this stuff. She's been doing it for years. She's very good at doing hypnotic regression. So she, myself, and Olivia James did a Zoom session where Misha used hypnotic regression to help put Olivia into a trance state. And while we were under the trance, she was under the trance state, Misha and I got to speak to Olivia, and it's called monitors, right? She's like the psychic, and we're the monitor kind of directing where we want her to target. It's a technique that helps sometimes yield better results than if one psychic just sat down alone. So it's really helpful to have a buddy taking notes and directing things sometimes. And so our goal for that one session was we wanted to contact our handlers. Who are these bastards who are messing with us? What do they look like? What are their names? Where are they at? What kind of technology do they have? And then on the other hand, we wanted to contact any positive white hat leadership that had a message for us that we needed to hear. So Olivia, she's in trance. She remote views. She's reaching out. She hones in on a group of handlers that are messing with their community. She said their name is the Princeton Group. I said, oh, that's interesting. Are they in Princeton? She's like, no. They're called the Princeton Group, but this office full of these dudes that she was like basically remote viewing, like peeking in on, were in somewhere in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And she said that she was like snooping in one of their minds of one of the lower level handler guys. She says these are like white guys with like, their white business shirts and their briefcases and their stale office. It smells like cigarettes and stale coffee and farts. And they basically pose in the real world, 3D world, as like healthcare executives. So if you jacked like their briefcase or they left it somewhere in Starbucks and you found a whole stack of files of people's records and information, oh, it's a health insurance executive. These are patient files. Okay, whatever. So that's their cover. So they're very highly paid people. They're generally male in this office. And Olivia, as she was trying to get information, these handlers, they're psychically gifted and trained as well. They have courses in all the stuff that everyone else does, and then like special courses on like handling, apparently, and psychic attack and remote viewing.
And the money behind it.
Yep. And the money. Yeah. And they've got the money and resources. They're very well, rewarded, and they make fun of us. You in the disclosure, and I'll get into that, what they said. But first, the person whose mind that Olivia had kind of occupied, like see through his eyes and hear through his ears and kind of access his thoughts, because of his training, he realized, hey guys, I got one. And then like all of a sudden what Olivia said is, oh, they know I'm here. And then she said, oh, they're surrounding the person that I'm inside right now. They're they're all grouped around them. And they're like, okay, what do you want? Who the fuck are you? And we said, Olivia spoke through this guy, and said, this is who we are. You know who we are. We're with the movement. We want to know who you are and why you're picking on us. And we want to know if you realize that you bastards are going to lose. And the head handler in charge of that group, we asked him, what's your name? Dennis. Dennis what? Pearson. So there's some asshole out there, a handler named Dennis Pearson in some farty office messing with us. And he said through Olivia, you people in the movement have no idea what is coming for you, what we have prepared for you. You disclosure people you're causing problems. He admitted that we're causing problems for them. They said, you used to be a minority of tinfoil hat conspiracy people that were off in your little corner with everyone making fun of you and throwing tomatoes at you. And now there's too many of you coming out with too much information too quickly that too many people in Johnny Public are thinking is credible. And so we're going to stop that. We're going to show you how you guys are going to lose. You have no chance. We have all the resources in the world. You have no idea what we have planned. It's this black pill shit, by the way. And you can tell I don't like it, by the way, probably. I just to a movement organizer. Oh, all the reasons why we can't. It's a psyop. Like just you can keep complaining over there. I'm going to keep organizing. They have launched something called Project Oblivion. And they're focusing on the people who are coming out the most and doing the most podcasts. Okay. And they weren't really able to mess with my conference last year. We have a lot of protection, by the way. Angelic, God source, positive ETs. We walk the path, we're good. We stray from the path, do bad things, and our protection is gone, and then people like me would be dead meat. So from what I understand. Who knows? Maybe I'm just being paranoid. But I'm going to walk the path anyway. And shortly after, though, my conference in July of last year, there was a conference called Contact at Sea. Oh, we can talk about Al Bielek later, sleeping giant, or in a short time left to us. But there was a Contact at Sea, UFO disclosure conference on a cruise ship. Really fun, right? And Misha, she reported, because she went on that cruise as a presenter, Misha Johnston. She said one of the presenters who was supposed to go on that event at sea beforehand got knocked down out of nowhere. Okay, this person described it to Misha as if this giant invisible hand just came out of nowhere and just smacked them into the ground. And they were forced to the ground so badly, they got hurt. They had to go to the hospital. They didn't make it to contact at sea.
Wow.
Then
Something targeted them hardcore.
what's Project Oblivion? It's these bastards who are going after us. And,
Well, what
what I
kind of
see,
energy, like what kind of weapon could they
telekinesis.
use? Like, so this is through the mind. They were able to shoot some type of energy that actually physically knocked them off of their feet, injured them to the point that they couldn't even come to the conference, but they weren't anywhere in sight. There's just a group of people that are able to, put their energies together collaboratively and shoot it like a weapon.
So there's multiple ways. That way would probably be along the lines of group telekinesis.
Hmm.
So like you'd have very powerful psychics in a trance state, maybe with like Blue Lotus and LSD and frequencies and binaural beats, like in a circle chanting. And you'd have some who might be more skilled at remote viewing so they can see the target. And then when psychics work together, they're able to combine their abilities. So like if you get two remote viewers together, and I've seen this, it was John Whitberg and at the time Tomas Alvin, before we realized what a scumbag he is. I'll say it publicly because Tomas Alvin has utilized his remote viewing capabilities to peeping Tom on the women, spy on women in our community while they're in bed or in the shower or stuff like that. Yes. And because remote viewers, if a remote viewer tries to spy on me and I don't have remote viewing capability, like I'm not activated right now, I might not know. I might get a feeling like I feel like I'm being watched. What the F, But a remote viewer like Penny Bradley, Amaria Sweet, or Susan Long, all three have told me that Tomas Alvin peeping Tomed on them. I said, what is that like? And Penny's like, well, imagine like, you're lying in your bed and you get a weird feeling, and then you look up and there's like a face staring down at you from above the crown molding. And you just like, get the F out of here. What are you doing here, Tomas? Like, get the fuck out of here. Where like Susan said, yeah, or like she's trying to take a shower and he's like trying to, you see like an astral head peeking over the shower stall.
But how do they know it's not like some other entity from some other dimension or some other, race? It could be like, like I don't even know if, I'm still not sure about all these aliens, but it could be some grays or some
Could
other
be.
energies where
It could be.
it's like, because, to just point it that it's this group that's, or even to knock that person, did
Well,
they know? Like, it's just that's assuming
we
that maybe it is this group
so
and
so
like,
let me speak to that. It could be the Princeton group of handlers who attacked that one particular person. It could have been negative grays or Draco. Okay, they certainly have that psionic capability from everything I'm told, and all the recalls of people in our community. Or it could have been a different group. But then later on, when Misha herself was on board the Contact at Sea cruise ship, as she was checking into her cabin with her cabin mate, one of her gal pals on the cruise with her, Misha was thrown to the ground so forcefully it injured her back. And it happened in front of her cabin mate. So her cabin mate's like, what the hell? Like 1 minute you're standing, like next thing you're on the floor and you're like in pain. Like, what the F? Okay. And Misha said that luckily for her, there was an acupuncturist on the cruise, and she got him to work on her for like the 2 or 3 days before her presentation. And someone else lent her a back brace. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to speak. And so, for me, whether it's Greys or Draconians or this psychic group or that psychic group, the point is that our community is very much under attack. I'm not going to assume everything is the one Princeton group, but I will assume, because they told me they're part of attacking us. Because what happened, this gets even better. During that channeling session with Olivia James Greymouse and Misha and I, after kind of like we got tired of speaking to the bad guys, like while they were talking shit to us, my father, who died from the jabs 2 Novembers ago, he came through and he was telling me to fight and to be strong, and that we're doing the right thing and these guys can't hurt us, and that's like what my dad would say. And then I know that he's right. And then we spoke with a white hat leadership guy who basically was someone who's ahead of us in the timeline on a darker timeline. And what he said was, right now, we have a whole generation of young people, some of whom have already been born and some who are being born now. And the white hat guy from this dark future timeline where things were not going well, look like a Terminator future timeline where he's like holed up in some underground base with not many people, being like, holy shit, you guys need to get your shit together back now in the past so we don't have what I'm experiencing now in your possible future. He said right now there's a group of people called the Olympus, the Olympus children. It's as if they're gods who fell from the heights of Mount Olympus to earth to assist us mere mortals, and they're too good for this world because of all the love and amazingness they have to bring and share and manifest here. But they're here nonetheless, and they're here to help us, and we need to protect them because the other side is doing everything they can to kill off and blunt the brightness of these children with all the injectables and the crap in the food and the stupid stuff they're trying to teach our young in the schools, which is exactly why my wife and I are going to homeschool our one and only daughter here. You know,
I think this is a good segue into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. And we don't have to have like a hard stop at 2 hours. So if this goes longer, if you still have time, then we can continue chatting because I'm enjoying this conversation. Taffy says, and now they're targeting administration autism. They want to put them in their own classification database. It's completely out of control because remember, autism people have special gifts. So I want to segue kind of with what you were talking about to Taffy's comment earlier, because I really feel that whatever is going on with the children and the ones that are being affected, by whatever the shots, the food, whatever it is that's going on, that are having these things happen to them, I really feel that, they're very special. And obviously they're proving how special they are with the gifts that they're coming out, that,
the telepathy tapes.
whatever is going on is they don't want them to be without limitations because they would be too powerful and they couldn't be able to explain how powerful these children would be if they were able to come out with their full gifts without them getting attacked the way they are. And I was just wondering what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah. So even though here in the 3D world, the vast majority of people aren't aware of astral projection and etheric energy and rituals and magical spells, the other side, they live and die by it. There's a famous saying by Ford or whoever, who said millionaires and, they
Don't
don't
believe in
use,
astrology, don't believe in
right,
astrology, but trillionaires live by it.
exactly. And so, if you have young people with autism and they're very psychically gifted, even though the vast majority of us don't know it, theoretically, those people with psychic gifts, they can do missions together. They can do astral projection to underground military bases where they're doing negative rituals, and they can do positive energy to undo a lot of the negative magic. And people might say, well, who cares? It's just made up stuff in your mind. This is universal law and physics, if you will. As above, so below, as within, so without. What happens in the spiritual realm comes first, is prime. And so if the bad guys are doing bad magic spells to enslave people and to cause misfortune and bad health, and they cast a spell to do that over a region, the last thing they want is for positive psychic people to go and pray with the angels and positive ETs and their guides to undo the negative magic, because then that will have knock-on effects in the here and now. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The darkness is being cleared out, in part because as the Earth and solar system rotate around the galactic center on the outer rim of the part tip of the eighth spiral arm. We're literally going from the age of whatever, Pisces or whatever, into age of Aquarius. Okay, this way, it's the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Apparently, that we're entering an area of higher photonic energy. And so we're literally getting blasted with energy. It's affecting our sun. There's more energy. And as we become more energetic, that's helping to speed up our vibrations and also burn out the darkness. And so there's a lot of these as above, so below spiritual effects that are absolutely affecting us in the here and now. It's just, how do you connect these things?
My situation being pounded one thing after another. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are going through a lot of things right now. I'm going through a lot of things right now, which I don't talk about. It just seems like, things are really shaking right now, and I guess we're just trying to figure out. Energy is off the chain. Attacks are coming from different places, and I guess we just need to stay strong through whatever it is, we're all going through, because we're all here for a purpose, and whatever that purpose is, I guess, some may know, some may remain to figure it out. But as long as you just stay strong through whatever it is that's happening and do the best that you can, that's all that you're asked to do, during this pivotal time in history.
Well, I want to speak to all of us getting pounded, right? And you, like you yourself said, Jesse, it's rough right now. I have great news. It's kind of like this. Up to now, you think about Miley Cyrus and her song coming in like a wrecking ball. The bad guys, they've been naked on their wrecking ball, swinging this way at us, trying to hit a wall on the far end. And they were trying to get all the momentum and everyone on their side and beat down all the good guys to the point where they could just swing the wrecking ball and just crash through the wall. And if they had been able to crash through the wall, that's where we would lose. That's where we'd have the darker timeline, the transhumanism future. We're all getting injected or having our heads cut off. Okay, that's what that would look like. And some people have seen those timelines, and they're not pretty. What I believe happened in this timeline is that as they swung through and they hit the wall, they didn't make it through the wall. They bounced off. Dong. Okay, so on the one hand, they failed, and that's great news. But on the other, we're swung all the way on their side into the darkness, and they almost won. So we're still in a world of shit. So yes, the tide is turned. We're finally swinging back the right way, but we're still in the middle of the dark forest. But as we keep coming, we're getting out of the forest more and more and more. And then eventually we will be totally out and swinging out. And that's really what's going on right now. And as proof of that, for the last 3 years in this movement, I've been putting in everything I got financially. And I was kind of getting to the end here because I'm like, oh my God, I paid $145,000 out of my own pocket for the first conference and got back 40. So I'm only down 105,000. And now I'm paying the rest of the 80,000 plus just to the resort. Well, 60,000 plus to the resort to have the food and beverage and the conference space and this and that. And I'm going to still need another, whatever, 70,000 or so, 80,000. And I'm like, holy cow, like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to sell? And I finally have found a supporter, someone who I helped get out of a psych unit after she had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And I had to help her advocate. Otherwise, she was going to get locked up for another 2 weeks and force medicated against her will. And her eyes are opening spiritually, and she has access to a lot of wealth, some Bitcoin stashed away. And now I've gotten enough support from her that I'm now fully funded for the conference and the platform and the cryptocurrency I'm going to launch. And I've been, last couple of days, actually, I'm not able to do it indefinitely, but I was able to send some funds out to a lot of people in our community who could really use it. And there's hope is on the way.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Sometimes with whatever shit's going on, there's bright light that comes in, and like I've never been without. I've always been fortunate enough to be taken care of. So no matter what this crazy storm that we're in, there's always somehow doors open, and somehow things balance it out, especially for the ones that are protected through this craziness. And I was, not always on the right path. I was on a crazy path myself, and being destructive. And now I'm just trying to do my best to balance and be the light, and help people whenever I can. And I think that that's our job, is to figure out what this place is, and then just figure out how to balance with it, and then have to deal with the repercussions of the past.
We're all healing from that past, as nasty as it may have been for a lot of people. Some people are still being messed with, but help is definitely on the way. Hey, Julie, and Ozzy Sue, and Derek. If things keep going the right way, I may be getting a lot more resources. And then if my platform takes off and this conference does really good and the cryptocurrency, now, I mean, I'm just telling everyone, I'm going to be getting resources out to the people in our community who will do something with it and advance the movement. And now, now when I've got a platform for people to be creators on and to get consults from like millions of people out in the public, and you're now working $200 an hour consults. So you only have to work 3, maybe 4 days a week if you want, maybe traveling the world, getting brought to conferences and wined and dined, and being paid money by Japanese TV stations to go to Tokyo and film, right? That all of a sudden, it's a very different outlook from what we've been going through. Like, oh my God, how do I make ends meet and this and that? We're going to be going from the tinfoil hat, black sheep loser squad to the golden radiant lions of abundance and world changing power.
Well, what a friend of mine said is, Jesse, hang in there. And sometimes there's going to be some turbulent times, but there's going to be a point where people are going to actually need, you, and need your wisdom, and need, you're going to help guide people through all this craziness. The people that, because my eyes have been open for, 30 plus years, even though my life took on some crazy turns with drugs and alcohol and whatever else it did.
So
But I've always
better. You've been there and done that. You're not someone
Yeah.
who's been closeted and sheltered and you don't know better. You've seen enough of the darkness to know like what that is, at least. So you're older and wiser.
Yeah, I'm 51 now, so I've been at this for 30 plus years, trying to rattle these cages. And and he was saying that there's going to be a time where people are going to come to you because you've seen this stuff. And no longer it's going to be the crazy cult leader conspiracy Jesse. It's going to be people are going to actually respect that things that you say. So I think that there's a lot to come, and I think that brighter days are ahead. I've always been an ultimate optimist. My life has been fairly good. Obviously I've had the ups and downs like everybody else, but had a lot more ups than downs. That's for sure. I've really enjoyed this ride. So we're just figuring out, we're just figuring it out. And, I think we're going to get to where we got to get to. So just everybody hang on, with whatever it is. And do you think that, this technology where people are going to be able to start to heal with frequencies, these med beds, these things, like we got, Dr. Sandra Michael and her EES systems that are apparently helping people. We've obviously had Royal Rife for a long time, with that kind of technologies. Or like, do you think that, people, no matter how dark their situation or bleak they may think things are, they should hold on for as long as possible because some good technology is, just around the corner?
So my take on that, oh, and someone's asking, it's not a tapestry, it's just a virtual background I had created along a new Earth Tartaria theme. it's a mix of technology and nature and humanity and balance. More nature and humanity than technology, hopefully. So I tell people help is on the way. We're winning, but you have to understand that the journey is every bit as important as the end point. A huge part of me is like, I can't wait to get to my Star Trek future now. Star Trek future now. Where's my spaceship? But that's not reality, and we're cutting ourselves and our life experiences short if we're so fixated on projecting into the future that we're not dealing with the here and the now, living in the now. And that means doing our shadow work and addressing our 3D lives. Like, yes, many people in our community want to jump right into the 4D and 5D. Oh, I'm so 4D and 5D. That's great. But it's also good if you can, keep a roof over your head and eat right and pay your bills to people that you owe, because, I screw the IRS, but other people that you owe, like, you should pay, like if you're renting from a landlord, pay them to live in their home so that they don't go broke, and if you're like, oh, I'm too 4D and 5D to that, to me, that's bypassing, people who, those are the same people who they want to run out and sell everything because they think that the change is going to happen tomorrow. Well, if the change doesn't happen tomorrow and you sold everything and then you went on a wild, crazy spending spree, maybe if the change happens a year from now, that's not going to do you really any good if you splurge right now. And you see that happens. You're like, oh, the world's going to end yesterday, so therefore I'm going to go crazy. Don't worry, the world will be over. It's okay. And then the world's not over. For them, it could be. People are asking about how do you protect yourself. You want to have a lot of prayer, and you want to cut cords with darkness. And you have free will to call in assistance from God's source and the angels and high level, positive, high frequency, benevolent beings consistent with your highest, greatest good and the highest, greatest good of all. And you want to use that type of language to be very clear about what you're asking from who. And that's a very good way of invoking protection. The best way for me, I like the self-protection of, I think you're familiar with it, Jesse. You may have heard of Ephesians 6:12 to 6:18. It's the armor of God. Okay. If you are of clear mind, the helmet of salvation, and you speak the truth, and your pants are held up, and you've got the breastplate of righteousness, nothing can get through it because you're a righteous person. No one can talk crap about you. It don't matter. And you've got the shield of faith, and the shoes of the gospel of peace. The way the world works and where you're going, and who, the higher source is, and that we're all one. Well, then the only weapon you need is the sword of the Spirit, the word of God, the voice. That's the sharpest sword in the universe, the most powerful weapon. And that's really, it's a spiritual warfare. We're not supposed to go John Wick and pitchforks and torches and burn down all the bad guys. We're here to fight a spiritual war and win with love and perseverance.
So this is our good friend Anthony Rogers in Australia, who's, going through a lot of, personal things right now. He was actually said in his comment earlier, if I can find it, it's right here. He said, last 2 months while walking Spike, which is his dog in the bush, I look around and feel like I'm being followed. Nothing there, only in the last 2 months. And, he's been dealing with a lot of things, but he says right here, Jess, you'll see my message to you this AM, which is right now in Australia. Thank you, Brian, for your info. It's helped me today. So, and he's someone that, needed some help. So, this right there, this made it all worth it.
Well, let me speak to that. If you feel like while you're walking Spike in the bush, and I love Australia. I get to spend 6 weeks down there after I graduated high school. They're in Brisbane in the outback. Got to go to Uluru or Ayers Rock. If you feel like you're being followed, the first thing or watched is to determine who or what is watching you. Because, especially now, since the community is so much under attack, yeah, there's a good chance that it's some nasty remote viewer, trying to hit you with some kind of weapon or psionic attack. But it could also be that you have guides or positive ETs who are assigned to assist you and they're bodyguarding you. So yeah, you are being followed, but it's different between being followed by a stalker, murderer, serial killer, and a team of bodyguards, right? And so there are people in our community like Penny Bradley, David Purcell. They have literally had a positive Draco reptilian queen. I believe her name is Her Highness Romlumvira. Okay, she wants to free her people of the black goo, and she has bloodline connections to Penny and David and other people down here, and she's assigned them protection. And people have said, "Oh my God, Penny Bradley!" Like they've seen her at a conference, and they have some vision. She's surrounded by these shadow people, and so they assume, "Oh my God, Penny's got evil entities attached to her, and she's possessed." No, that's a positive reptilian honor guard that's there to protect her. And so, depending on how you look at it and if you've got a clue or not, you could be like, oh my God, they're evil beings and Penny's possessed. Stay away, stay away. Or you could say, well, who are these beings? Why are they around? What do they want? Oh, that's why they're protecting Penny, because Penny is doing disclosure work, because Penny is going against her own bloodline Illuminati family who wants to eliminate over 9 out of 10 of us. And Penny is standing up against that. So I've learned a lot about discernment in my 3 short years in this movement. And so these are some tips and advice I have for people.
What about the attacks that people have to endure? One content creator attacking another. This person is this person, and like could be for a whole host of reasons. They could be paid ops attacking others, trying to, but then everybody's a paid op and everybody's a shill and everybody is like, it seems like there's so much finger pointing going in so many different directions that people forget the most important finger is to point it back at themselves and see where their responsibility is to the community and what their message is, and if they're going out attacking others, for why, right? Like, so how do you feel that this is all playing out and why? Because obviously you've probably seen it, maybe experienced
Oh,
it yourself.
absolutely, Jesse. I like to use specific examples to dispel the what if this, what if that, maybe that, because you can get caught up in that game endlessly. I like to say, like you were saying, you shall know them by their fruit, right? So, there's all these channelers and ET contacts, and how do we know who's real and who's a psyop and who's delusional? Well, let's see what they say, and then let's see what other people say, and then let's see what happens, and then let's take it all and then see what jives and then what is a square peg in a round hole. Okay. So you take a guy like Bashar. Bashar, during the COVID campaign and even now, if you go to his website, and I went and checked, I don't know, last time I checked, it literally says that Bashar, oh, thank you, Taffy. Bashar recommends everybody follow the expert medical advice of the World Health Organization, CDC, NIH, and whoever, and take the shots. Okay. And whenever in the audience people ask about the Illuminati and the dark forces and all of that, Bashar gaslights that person and says, oh, that's your shadow self. You don't need to be chasing at shadows. You're disempowering yourself, that the Illuminati don't exist. Oh, and get your shots. Okay, so
I don't know who this Bashar is,
he's
but
a
he's
very
a
famous
content creator.
channeler. He's a very famous channeler.
Okay,
Yeah.
channeler. Okay.
Daryl Anka is the human. He's a brother of famous singer Paul Anka, and he supposedly channels, and he's channeling something as far as I can tell. They call themselves part of the Sasani collective. The Sasani are an ET human hybrid race. They're one of the they're between the Greys and humans, and they're one of them and the Yahyel are two of the ET races that have a lot of human gray hybridization, and they're probably two of the likely races to hybridize with us after this whole awakening and disclosure happens. Because
Someone has said that my girlfriend Angeline is potentially from the Yael group.
Yep. Yeah. And so we have a lot of Yahyel starseeds down here to help with the integration of humanity with the Yahyel and our other starseed sisters and brothers. And it's a win-win. We're going to get to live longer instead of 80 years average, maybe 200 years average. Okay. We'll be a lot more telepathic. We'll look a lot more like sexy elves. I'm okay with that. I think that's good. We'll be a little bit less inbred earthling down here on Earth, which we do have some of that. So those are all wins. But just because Bashar claims he's speaking to the Sasani collective, fine. Whoever you claim you're speaking to is one thing. Now let's listen to what you say. There are other people, channelers like Pamela Aralyn, who I used to like. And then in the run up to the elections, her contacts were constantly saying, if the orange man, or whatever, they gave him some nickname, if he wins, then it's going to be a very bad, negative timeline. And there's going to be war and horrible, tragedy. But if the blue lady wins, it's going to be a timeline of peace and a golden era. Okay. So maybe if like you're, a team blue person, like you're going to just eat that up. But for me, like those are clear signs. Don't listen to those people and call them out. But have a reason for calling them out. Don't just say, "Oh, I don't like that person." No, I don't like that person because he's pushing the jabs. Okay. So these are some of the. Then there are other people who are smearing our community very actively. So Dr. Kimberly McGeorge has a whole YouTube channel where she's going down my presenters list of my conferences and doing a whole episode with her hairdresser, smearing all my presenters. And not only that, she smeared Kathy O'Brien, okay, who wrote Transformation of America, who was a sex slave to like George Bush and all those people, and Bob Hope, okay, and Fiona Barnett, people like that. And those are some of the most credible, well-documented people in our community. And so for Dr. Kimberly McGeorge to go after Kathy O'Brien tells me everything I need to know. And some of these people, they may be getting paid very well, like Dr. Stephen Greer, and they know damn well what they're doing. People like Kimberly McGeorge, what I suspect is she's psychically gifted. She's probably been in the programs. She's got sources who she says are very high level and are feeding her information. I believe that those are corrupted handlers, and they're using her as an attack dog on our community. So that's just 3 examples. And then I mentioned the Voice to Skull, a person attacking Drago Reed and Laura Eisenhower. So there's a lot of modalities that the other side uses to throw their flying monkeys at us.
Now, are these flying monkeys that are being thrown, are some of them willing, some of them unwilling? Like, are there just some people that are playing their part? They're not paid. They're not part of some program, they at least that they know of. But for some reason, they just, like the attacks on you in the show, could this person basically just be someone out there that just wants to hate on you and your show? Or do you think that these are actual operatives that are put into place to cause these disruptions, to cause these people to, to get people to not believe in some of the things that are going on? So, but are there not just some people out there that just, just feel that, all of this stuff is woo woo and crazy, and they're just doing what they can to expose it, but they're
that's Darcy Weir.
They're not even operatives.
That guy's name is Darcy Weir. And so he's doing documentaries on how Corey Good is full of shit, which is fine because Corey Good to a large extent is full of shit. But then he goes on to say that all secret space program is basically, made up live action role playing and full of shit. That's the impression I get. So he's somebody who means perfectly well. And from his 3D matrix mindset, he really does think we're full of shit. So he'll go and do, exposés about us, thinking he's in the right. So that's someone who they're a debunker, but they're debunking from a place of at least, honesty, right? Like they think they're honestly debunking. Then there are people like Dr. Kimberly McGeorge, where she's got a lot of ego. And so, she's happy to do shows with her hairdresser to tear us down while having her supposedly amazing contacts feed her information. I'm going to share my screen, but I shared a post. It was a news article about Jesse Balk getting arrested. This guy right here. I posted about this. I'm going to share my screen. And this is somebody where I knew when I entered in the community and started making friends with everybody, I made it a point to find out who the troublemakers are and who the stalkers are as well. And, people who are like, they talk about maybe being in the programs. So I was talking to Jesse here, and he has had recall and dreams of fighting reptilians. Okay. And being MK Ultra. And then what he was saying is he goes back and forth. He says, well, MK Ultra is real. And maybe I was like put into simulations, and everyone talking about secret space programs and time travel. They were really abducted, but they were put on a simulator and given drugs. Okay. That's his line. And while he was saying that, he's been calling and messaging people in our community, telling them like Penny Bradley, I mentioned, he threatened her years ago that he was going to hunt her down and slit her throat. Well, here's an article about how after he got pulled over for a traffic stop by his local police, he started doing Facebook rants about how he's going to blow up and kill all the police officers in that township.
What?
And so what I wrote here is Jesse Balk, who's been terrorizing our disclosure community for years now, has been busted for threatening his local police department and posting pics of a firearm. Looked like a 9mm pistol, maybe a SIG, probably a Glock. Matthew Morney identified it as an M&P shield, he thinks it is. But anyway, that he's not supposed to be in possession of. Having interacted with him for a bit before he eventually wigged out on me too, my analysis is this. Jesse has been in the programs, and in the here and now is fried out to the point he's a useful idiot troll for the other side to mess with us, like this flying monkey they throw at us. The other side probably doesn't have much in the way of bandwidth or resources these days to care about their poor Manchurian candidate. So for these reasons, I do take pity on him a bit, but to the extent he terrorizes the rest of us, well, and then top hat tip to Gray Mouse, Olivia James, because she pointed this out to me. And then he's talking about how, while an officer drove Balk to the Metro Jefferson Public Safety Building, Balk allegedly made several threats of mass harm to Watertown police officers. Police said the threats were recorded by camera in the patrol car. All of you are going to get shot the F up, he allegedly said. Your whole precinct, your whole station, boom. Okay, he allegedly continued. January 16th, 2004, 26 cops got shot in Texas. That ain't nothing to what Watertown is going to experience. And then he doesn't look very tough here. And they obviously punched him in the face a couple times. Because while you can talk shit to us in the community, maybe online over a keyboard, it doesn't work doing it to the cops to their face. So that's 4 real life examples right there. And I got more. Yeah. I mean, and Tomas Alvin, he's a member of the community. He's been in the SSP. He was a military intelligence officer in the Nachtwaffen Dark Fleet for the German breakaway. And now down here, he uses his remote viewing to be a peeping Tom molester. So is he real? Yes. Is he a real asshole? Yes. Can you be both at the same time? Yes. And that's where the discernment thing, it gets pretty wild. People, there's so many layers, people are like, oh, well, he's a stalker, then he can't be real. That's not true. Eugene Sonny Irvin out of Texas, his father used to be a wealthy businessman who ran with the George Bush types in Dallas back in the day. And for what I can tell, Eugene himself was put in the programs and abused very badly. And now he rants and raves at people about being on the white hat side and stalks people in our community and threatens to kill us and burn our houses down because we're not white hat enough for him.
That's crazy. Now, I did want to talk about one of the things that guy did say, though, about potentially, people being MK'd Ultra'd, which many people are. The MK Ultra program, went on a lot of voice to skull technologies, implementing thoughts and ideas. People, as you talked about, going into other people's minds and seeing them in dreams and seeing the kind of things like that. So, what if a lot of this, what people feel and experiencing other races, places, aliens and ETs, what if this is all just a big mind control experiment that the world is under, and a lot of what this is happening to everybody is actually planned execution to, poison the mind, corrupt the mind into thinking, and then they use the movies and Hollywood and space and all this stuff, is that this whole thing that's happening and experiences that people are having with talking to people with other places are actually set up in these programs to have these communications. And do you know what I mean? This could be a giant big mind fuck that everybody's going under.
So there's a lot of that, but it's not all of that. The other side in evil is not omnipotent. And the idea that there's so much evil, but there's no good and there's no counterbalance, there is, okay? And like I said, through these specific examples and discernment, there are times where you can spot the people who are full of shit. They've got off messaging. It doesn't resonate, and there are people, we have natural truth detectors, and there are others of us who can see auras, and they can see spiritually when people are lying, just like they can see spiritually when we're telling the truth. So there's that type of discernment. There's people like when Tony Rodriguez has really good recall and writes Series Colony Cavalier and now Project Starmaker, and I believe he might have a third book coming out. And then he gets that independently verified by the Farsight Institute. Okay, that's not a mind fuck. That's not a setup. No one gave Dr. Courtney Brown $1 million and had Dr. Brown like beam telepathically, into his remote viewing team, like exactly what the other side wants him to broadcast. Because when you look at what the Farsight Institute is sharing, that's shit that the other side does not want people to know. Okay, so that goes against the whole mindfuck thing. There are people like, what's another good one? And just people like us all our lives who have starseed families. As an investigator, I'm meeting so many people who have the same data points separately. And these are things that fly in the face of the negative narrative, where we have people who are telepathically in contact with Sasquatch, and the Palladians. There are people in our community, they're in touch with Valiant Thor and Indrid Cold. Valiant Thor was a stranger at the Pentagon who was interfacing with the Eisenhower administration and others after that. And so there's too much independent things happening to make it a mind fuck. So that's my answer for you. Again, there is a lot of effort to get us to be mind controlled and go down the negative narrative, but that's not the whole thing. And when you look at the evil people, they're thank God in general, they're freaking incompetent.
Scared little cowards.
They are. And because they're little puppets, because they're the kind of people who can be manipulated and blackmailed. Whereas people like us, we're like, we'd rather die.
And I really love that answer. What you said is that, to think that, it's all just dark out there, that there is no good, that there is no light. I feel that I've been protected through my life through, whatever it is, through all the craziness that I've been through in my life, there's always just been this protection that I felt around me. And, to have, think that just the world is full of darkness. I don't. I've always had hope. I've always, felt that, we are going to make this. I feel it's supposed to be a utopia. I've seen how this place is supposed to be. And this telekinesis that you're talking about is how people are supposed to be communicating, not intrusively, but, I think that we're much, more powerful than we've been dumbed down to be. And I've always felt that I was going to live here for hundreds of years. I've like, as crazy as that, I'm living to 180 for sure.
Oh yeah,
I've always just
a medical bed.
felt that, we're supposed to be here a lot longer than we have. So I've always had these feelings inside of me, and I don't see it as all dark out there. I just pose questions about what ifs, so we can think about not just that everything is, because everything isn't gloom and doom, but everything isn't also roses and cherries right now. There's still a lot of bumps in the road, but I sure do feel we're heading in the right direction.
We are. We absolutely are. I know Anthony asked about David Wilcock. I have compassion for David Wilcock. I think he has shared good information in the past, but by David's own admission, he's been effed with and mind controlled. He did a 3-hour live stream a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, maybe, where he talks about how the other side turned him into a banana sandwich. That's not a good thing. That's being sexually assaulted multiple ways at once.
What?
And yeah, he's like, they made me into a banana sandwich. It's on video. I don't know if he took it down, but I watched it, and he's having a minor breakdown.
Wow.
And what I believe is that he fell too close with a certain new age TV streaming service that has Luciferian Khazarian mafia connections. And that has attacked people literally physically in our community and tried to murder some of them.
Wow. And we interviewed some of the people that you talked about. We never interviewed David Wilcock. We're definitely interested in having him on our show one day, but I've interviewed some big names, and I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, this person tried to they feel is responsible for the death of somebody, and be careful of that person. And because people, obviously when you talk to certain people, I guess trust me. And so they tell me things about what they think about other people, and just to be careful and things. And so I've had that happen, where some people that are in the community maybe not have such, good intentions.
No. Sometimes they'll like maybe try to poison you or something like that. It's there's a lot of people in the community, and there's a lot of unhealed trauma. So sometimes we're our own worst enemies. There are people who have altars that come out, and there are people in our community who will say, you know what, I did all this writing, and I did all this work and created all these files for my disclosure show that I was going to do the next day. And then when I woke up, it was all deleted. Okay. This was someone in our community. And what other people said to this person, like Arkin was saying to this one person, he said, dude, you don't understand. They don't have to teleport into your room and start up your computer and erase the files you just worked on. They just have to trigger the right altar of yours, and you'll delete all your shit and you won't even know it.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. But there also are the hackers and things out there as well. So we've interviewed this whistleblower that was part of the Israel's defense. He was a computer guy.
IDF.
He compete in 2000 or after 2001. He was working in Israel to create the defense system around the wall, the perimeter defense system, I think he called it. And then he was working in with the U.S. government on border security. And when he was talking, he was saying that the people, it was really weird because the people that were doing border security at the highest levels, this guy's a computer programmer, they were talking weird shit like New World Order stuff and all this kind of stuff. So he was like, this guy came from Israel.
Well,
And
that's because
then
at the heart of it, Israel is the old stronghold of all of that, because Israel is where the Khazarian mafia really originated, and then they made it over to the Ukraine. And so that's an ancient stronghold of evil going back to biblical times, where there were Molech and Baal worshippers. And that's why we have so much of and Baphomet worshippers. So that's where all the child sacrifice comes in.
So then he started working after he didn't want to work with these border securities, the New World Order weirdos. He was like, so he went and he worked for an automotive company, during surveillance, for big, the tech stuff, the computer stuff that goes into, all the cars, the new high-tech cars and stuff.
Surveillance.
Well, but what he found out is, when your car gets a recall, you know how they give, like, you get a car and you have to get a recall for airbag or this or that or whatever. They make you bring it in. They were actually using those recalls when they didn't need to be recalled, for them to take all the data and information from that car. And so he started finding this stuff, and he's like, this is not right and he's at like a high level, using an executive level. And he started to speak out about this, and he became a huge targeted individual, and talking about they gave him a heart attack and everything, like some crazy stuff. And he's a computer guy with his own servers and things, and they've literally come and deleted things on his computer. He's like got all the firewalls and protections, and they've done the remote stuff where they've
came to him. NSA level encryption and all that.
Oh yeah, because this guy's not just some guy trying to figure shit out. He was at a very high level with a lot of information about how their systems work and the surveillance and border security. So they came at him hard, and he's still going. Not a lot of people allow him to speak and about and to share his story and stuff. So he's been on our show quite a few times, but it's fascinating how technological, and we're talking about a guy who's got encryption. They break his encrypted encryption. So this is of people of the highest level.
Right. Yeah, the Mossad and CIA have access to the NSA, probably some of the world's best hackers. Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't talk about here today that you maybe wanted to share before we start to wrap this up? And I'm open to you coming back on soon if you'd like.
That'd be great. We'll schedule that offline. I'm going to be taking a trip next month, get some rest and relaxation time, but anytime after the trip, I'm open. I just like to leave off with, thanks to the audience for hanging in with us, for this episode. And your questions, Jesse. I love the opportunity to get to explain where I'm coming from, and also point out what's happening in the movement, and the stalkers. I never give up an opportunity to call them out. If people could please check out the conference at fulldisclosuremovement.org. And then also, I'll just present my screen real quick here. I'm starting up a new weekly newsletter, which is the Full Disclosure Now newsletter. It's going to be every Friday. I'm releasing it. So it's fulldisclosure.network. That's all you need to put into your toolbar, and you'll get redirected there. And then I also have a Rumble channel, Full Disclosure Network, that I'm just starting out. And the reason why this is important is because when I launch our own platform, then to get to our platform, you'll be able to find us through those outlets. And then, to stay up to date on everything going on in the movement and all the exciting stuff with our cryptocurrency, please join the newsletter as well at fulldisclosure.network. And then for conference tickets, join us at fulldisclosuremovement.org. And so thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for, sharing your thoughts and your story. you're an amazing individual. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm like, well, why do we have this sooner? But I guess everything is in time when it because we've been friends online for quite a long time, and so it's finally nice to be able to communicate with you.
You were
And
one of those people where when I friended Sean Bond and it opened up the doors to the disclosure community, I just friended everyone I could. And I saw the Jesse Howe show, so I sent you a friend request off of that, I believe.
yeah, and we talked a little bit, but we didn't, and we sent a few things here and there, but we didn't, really talk too much. But I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation. Well, awesome. May the source be with you and protection around you during this pivotal time in history. Knowledge is power. The more knowledge we all have collectively, the less power they have over us. Tomorrow on the Missing Link Live, we've got Dwayne Hayes, aka Diego Garcia, coming back, I think, for like the 13th or 14th time.
It's a secret
He
space program base. They have SSP ships will go to Diego Garcia at certain times, super late at night. They lock down the base and they do supply runs. And people remember the ships picking up everything like sneakers and whiskey and booze or whatever, and then going back up into space. But they have like a weekly supply run there. And then Mark DiMitzio remembers being MK Ultra'd and tortured terribly at Diego Garcia.
apparently that's where the stolen gold heist was out of as well, where they put through there, and then they went over Ukraine. They had a double plane, and then one of the planes went down with already dead bodies in it, and they ended up taking off with, I don't know, we've had some people come on and talk some crazy stuff, but I think he was talking about that Diego Garcia as well. But fascinating. Thanks, brother. Let's all face infinity without flinching for one love, one heart, one life. Namaste, everybody. And if they ever ask you to put on a breathing inhibitor again, Brian, you know what to say? No maske.
Oh, no mask. Oh, I'm thinking more.
Okay, love y'all. We'll see you next time we see you back here on The Missing Link. Have a wonderful weekend. And thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.